This is Autoline This Week, the show that gets you inside the global automotive industry. Autoline This Week partnered with the Consulate General of Canada in Detroit to produce this episode.
Hi, I'm John McElroy, and thanks for joining us on Autoline This Week. Today, we're going to be talking about Magna, the giant Canadian supplier that is really transforming what an automotive supplier can be. And we're going to be talking about Magna because my special guest today is Swamy Kotagiri. He is the Chief Executive Officer of Magna, formerly the Chief Technology Officer, but now you're running the show, Swamy, and thanks so much for making time to talk with us this morning.
Good morning, John. My pleasure. A tech geek turned into a CEO, so we can have all the fun talking about the technology.
That's great. Also joining us today are Tom Murphy from Wards Intelligence and Mark Phelan, the car critic from the Detroit Free Press. And thanks to you guys for joining us as well.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you.
Well, Swamy, let's kick this conversation off with what's been big in the news. Magna put in a bid to buy a supplier company called Veoneer. I'm saying this for the audience's benefit because, of course, I know you know all about it. But Veoneer is really a leader in ADAS, Advanced Driver Assistance Systems, a segment of the market that's booming. Then Qualcomm came in and put in even a better deal. So my question is that it? Is Qualcomm going to get it? Are you guys going to sweeten the pot? Are others going to come in? What do you think is going to happen here?
As far as others are concerned, your guess is as good as mine, John, right? But we talked about it in our investor strategy as we went through it, that Magna is going to continue to look at accelerating our investments in the megatrend areas, which is electrification, ADAS, and even, call it the mobility as a service and the new entrants coming in. We have a really good business in ADAS. We have been the leaders in the vision-based ADAS systems. So this is just all about augmenting, right? If you look at the market, we felt there was, efficiencies to be had, both in terms of scale, in terms of the spending that you do in some of the activities that are not really consumer-facing, right? I mean, at the end of the day, the consumer is just interested in getting the features. How we do it and how it's done is left to the OEMs and the tier ones, and obviously we depend on the OEMs to give that direction. For us, this was a way to further strengthen some of the areas that we had. We had the Icon radar that we talked about a few times, and with Veoneer, they had call it the manufacturing base already. This would fit in really well with the overall roadmap. So that's just one example, and scale obviously, and so on and so forth. But we always have been disciplined, and I think we'll continue to stay disciplined to say this is our strategy, this is what we think we should be doing, and that's how we started. And I think we're going to continue to evaluate all the options, but let's see where the chips fall.
Swamy, can you give us an update on the Fisker work? Of course, you have the Magna Steyr plant there in Austria that has been contract assembling vehicles for multiple automakers for many, many years. And now you get to do a battery electric with Fisker. Can you give us an update on that program and talk a bit more about other potential contracts, for battery electrics?
Yeah, for sure, Tom. I think, as you know, the Graz facility or the European footprint that we have there has produced to date more than 3 million vehicles. It's interesting, if you look back and see over time what that facility has done. We are producing today already an electric vehicle for Jaguar, as you know, the I-Pace. We do both the I-Pace and the E-Pace. We are also doing the ArcFox in China. So it's kind of not the first one, but it's a very interesting project for us when we talked about Fisker doing the contract vehicle assembly, the full vehicle engineering, working with them. In addition to that, we're supplying a whole bunch of other systems, right, from the Magna portfolio, including ADAS. And I leave it to the Fiskers to talk about it, but many more systems in there. Program seems to be going very well. The teams are working really well going through that. As you know, we just finished the second milestone of signing up the manufacturing agreement fully. So I would say it's really going well. And to the last part of your question, there is many discussions on the topic with various existing OEMs about variants, whether it's EV or otherwise, and the new entrants. And a good thing is that us offering the platform of a EV, the ADAS platform, the body and the vehicle platforms in general, hopefully gets the new entrants to focus on the consumer facing things of the business models and how to get to the market fast and so on. And Magna bringing all the the systems in place and help them commercialize and scale. We are hoping we could be really good partners to many of them.
Swamy, there have been so many disruptions of production facilities around the world due to COVID over the last year and a half. Have you have you had any of those at the facility in Graz? And what do you do about them? How do you make sure that you can meet the build schedules that automakers want you to commit to?
Yeah, Mark, a great question. As you know, we all thought COVID-19 was a big event in itself, and then came the snowstorms in Texas and the fires in factories in different places. So automotive industry generally has had some really challenging times over the last, I would say, 12 to 14 months. As you know, I think the industry has done, given conditions, address them very well coming together. From our side, we are working with the OEMs. To date, I'm happy to say we haven't had to shut down any customer on our account. But at the end of the day, any one part not supplied, stops the car from being built, right? So there have been some stoppages, some changes in schedules and so on that we are working through. But all in all, I think a lot of inefficiencies with the start stops and changes and all of those things coming in short order, and the whole industry is dealing with it. But I've been very happy to see how our team at Magna has been able to manage through that. And you saw some of that in the results, looking at our cost basis, being able to pivot quick enough. But at the same time, we got to keep in mind all this, call it spring-loaded, elastic, pent-up demand comes back. We want to be ready, right? And we're all looking forward to that. So till date, everything has been great, and we're, I think, very well planned to be able to work through this fast-changing demand curves here.
Swamy, we're seeing in the automotive industry, the traditional auto industry, having to convert to electric vehicles. They're committing a lot of money. They promise that they're going to do a lot by the end of this decade. My question to you is, where do you think they're going to go? Are they going to make or buy these components? And what's the opportunity for Magna? And I ask because certainly just a couple of years ago, it looked like they were buying everything. Now, as volume gets up, it looks like they're bringing more in-house. So again, where do you think that opportunities for Magna lies?
I've always believed, John, and I think I still do, is that at the end of the day, the efficiencies matter. Right? Scale and efficiency matters. If you look at any of the system, for example, an e-machine, you got to get to a point where you have to have a very important reason for you, to be able to do it yourself. If it is the IP, if it's a platform, and so on. But if you just, and a lot of that is happening in software, and there's different layers in a system where you can customize and differentiate. But if you get to the base level of making a motor, for example, where do you get the copper? What's the scale of buy you have on copper? How do you put it together? There is efficiencies there. And I think the capital efficiency part of the variable will influence the thinking process in the long term. But usually when a technology is in its infancy, whether it's an OEM or a tier one, everybody wants to have that control to understand how that comes together, even if you decide to buy later, you know the system, what goes in and how it goes in, and so on and so forth, right? So I think in the short term, there might be a lot of insourcing and thinking through and understanding the overall system. But in the long term, I think there is always going to be a balance, and there's going to be quite a bit of buy from the outside. From a Magna perspective, just like if you go back 20, 30, 40, 50 years ago, engines and transmissions, they were all made in-house, right, from the OEMs. But they got to a certain level and say, my differentiation is this, but, I would go out. Any tier one that shows that system knowledge and understanding and provides a value proposition that gives the flexibility to the OEM, and not in a black box, right? They are allowed to change, and they're allowed to flex and get the differentiation they need for their brand. I think companies like Magna will do really well. And I always talked about systems and how they interact and come together, and think of overall as a system, not in a rabbit hole. And I think that's an advantage that Magna has, that we can think through, seats and body structures and, EV drives and ADAS systems and the entire electrical architecture. Again, don't wait for the OEMs to tell what they need. Go to them and say, here is a value proposition we can bring to the table. I think that's the sign of a good tier one, and that's what we want to do.
So this migration, I'm sorry, Mark. So the migration from internal combustion vehicles to battery electric vehicles, it has to cause fits for every supplier out there that is trying to do both sides. And I'm just wondering if you could talk a bit how your migration is going. I know that you have the battery electric, you have a lot of business in battery electrics. You have electrified axles, which is really an important step in that direction as well. But do you think you're keeping pace, or even perhaps ahead of pace, or even behind the industry in terms of where you need to be for the next 5 or 10 years in terms of being prepared for much higher volumes of battery electrics?
I think, Tom, the way I look at a vehicle or a car, right, is there is certain aspects of the vehicle that are agnostic to what I would call the power source, right? I'm hoping you'll be sitting in a car, you need a seat, you need a body structure, you need a chassis, and so on and so forth, right? It doesn't mean those product areas are not changing, they're evolving, right? The floor used to have a tunnel in the middle, it's not, it's a flat. The seat height would be different, the ingress and egress is going to be different, so the body structure changes. We sit back and look at it, is the product is evolving, but the fundamental processes that are required to make a body structure, a chassis, still are the same, right? You need the extrusion, you need the stamping, you need the hot stamping, and so on and so forth. If you have all the tools in the toolbox and not be trying to pigeonhole a product into a process, unfortunately, we don't have to. We have all the manufacturing processes that are required. Look ahead and see, how this is evolving, and grow with the product. About 70% of Magna's product falls into that category, right? So we have all the processes, whether you have an e-drive or a IC engine, like I told you, you're going to have seats and body structures and so on and so forth. Then comes the other part, which is directly impacted by electrification, like you said, which is, the e-drives. We used to have, we still are the leader in the all-wheel drive, four-wheel drive system. We take that and we are converting that into the eDrive system, and we have multiple eDrive programs today. Some are launched, some are going to be launched, and we continue to build that portfolio. So I would say we are keeping pace. When I say that, I think there's a lot of confusion in the electrification industry where P1 and P2 and P3, and I won't get into the details of it, but if you're making a starter and an alternator, your existential crisis, right? Because it's not going to be there, and it moves on. All of that happened first. Now, when you talk of PHEVs and EVs, we are really talking about the eDrives, and our business was in driveline systems. So only now are we getting into that discussions, right? And still there is a long tail for hybrid dual clutch transmissions and so on and so forth, because the market's there. Just to give you an idea, we have great visibility up till 2030 on a lot of these programs that are already awarded to us, right? So we have the breathing space. Now we're focusing on how do we win. If you look beyond 2025, a large part of Magna's powertrain will be coming from the electrical our EV-based product line. So I would say, I never say we should get complacent. We are starting off well and doing well, but we are focused, like I said, one of the pillars of our strategy is to continue to accelerate investment in this area. The JV with LG was one example of that, right? I think we have to keep that balance between the two, but there is other areas that are impacted by electrification we don't talk about. Our body and chassis system. We are the largest, metal forming groups in the world. And battery enclosures that come, which holds the batteries together, have a content per vehicle that is more favorable than an e-drive. And nobody makes it, right? I mean, think of it. We can do stamp, we can roll form, we can do any process with any material, composite or any metal. And we have a lot of programs already on it. And assuming that every vehicle needs to have a battery enclosure, 2030, let's say 30% vehicles need this, we're talking $30-40 billion worth of market. And we're from a process perspective, we're the leaders in that segment today. So there is that additional content per vehicle and opportunity for us, which is not talked about as much as the e-drives, right?
Right. Thanks.
And I'm so glad that you made that point, because it leads perfectly into what I wanted to ask you. Looking forward, 2025, a large part of your drivetrain business will be for electric vehicles, you said. Can you put a percentage on that? How much of the business for drivetrains do you think, how much of Magna's business for drivetrains do you think will be electric, 5 years from now, 10 years from now?
If you look at beyond 2025, Mark, and we look at the managed sales, right, which is Magna and the JV equity income, because we're looking at in totality, I would say 50% of our business, very roughly, would be from the electrified side of things beyond 2025, and that will continue to grow.
And when you say electrified, you mean hybrid, plug-in, and pure battery? Is that right?
That's right. That's right.
Okay, thank you very much. Great. Yeah. Thanks. What does the shift to that kind of component do to your workforce needs in terms of headcount, manufacturing?
The way we are looking at, Mark, like, again, we need to have a 5 or 10 year outlook. That falls into the people development and training side of things, right? There is certain aspects. You still need a clutch. You still need a electric drive. That means you have a mechanical gearbox system. So, a lot of those things go into when we invest. Are we investing for 5 years or 10 years or beyond? Same thing applies to people, skill, and knowledge, right? So there is a lot of thought that's been put in, even from 2017, 2018, in training of mechatronics and controls. And, we have an e-learning platform where any employee in Magna can stand back and say, hey, I want to learn about DFMEA, or I want to learn about, certain product line. There is the snippets of learning, 15, 20 minutes, and you take, 10, 15 classes and, get there and learn yourself. A lot of our divisions have areas that are separated out in their facility. 2 or 3 divisions work together and say, what we're going to do on the job training here in mechatronics or controls and so on. So there is a lot of focus and impetus on the job training, in addition to trying to get the talent from the outside, whether it's internship programs and so on and so forth. I am more looking at the evolution of the training force rather than saying replacing. Because as the business grows, we need more people. We'll be getting the talent that is needed while we focus on, upgrading some. I shouldn't say upgrading, it's transforming the skills, because, both are needed. That's how we are looking at it, Mark.
Thank you.
Swamy, the stock market clearly likes what Magna's been doing. I mean, over the last year, your stock more than doubled. It's down lately. I think it's down 20% or so. I'm guessing maybe that's because of the chip shortage. I'd like to ask you about that, but also, where's your vision of going forward from here now that you're the CEO of the company? It's extraordinary, the breadth of things that Magna covers in the automotive industry. You're into all kinds of parts and components. You're on the bleeding edge of technology and ADAS and electrification. You can even assemble and do assemble vehicles for car companies. How far do you take it? What's this supplier company called Magna going to become?
Yeah, I think, John, you asked a very important question. For us, Magna, although from the outside is looked at as a bunch of portfolios and different products, I think there is a little bit of method to the madness when you sit back and look and say, look, 70% of the Magna's products are agnostic to some of these trends. They're going to evolve, but they're not going away. And we really have a market leading position in most of the product areas that we are in. And what I mean by that, we are not just present, we are, have a significant position, whether it's the body and chassis, which is Cosma and exteriors, the inside mirrors and the outside mirrors, the mechatronics, the all-wheel drive, four-wheel drive systems, the largest independent transmission supplier. So most areas that we are present in, we have a significant position. And if you look at call it the key pillars of our strategy, one thing we're going to focus right now is in how do we accelerate the investment in areas of electrification, ADAS, and new mobility, right? So that kind of shifts the portfolio as we grow in, that becoming a larger part, right? We have a good balance sheet, which is kind of talks about the financial discipline we had, and we will remain very much rooted to that. First priority is to look at investing in the business prudently and continue to grow in areas that are relevant, whether organic or inorganic. And the excess cash that we have, is coming in increasing dividends if you look at the history, or the share buybacks at that point of time. So that's very foundational. If you look at the broad portfolio of Magna, automotive industry is transforming. There is a lot of new models and new entrants coming because of EV. Tom, you talked about it. I think we have a really significant advantage of bringing something of value to these people, to the new entrants, and also to the OEMs, existing OEMs today who are looking at it and say, how do we have different variants, right? So if I can bring a structural platform, if I can bring a EV platform, with still enough flexibility for the OEMs to do what they need to do to differentiate, I think there is a big play in what I call this transforming mobility landscape, right? And not to forget, Magna is inherently the operational excellence DNA. And, we'll continue to stay focused on that because it's one of the most complex industry that you all know, right? And you got to keep our eye on the ball there. That's very important. And it's a $3 trillion industry, and we are just 40 billion. A long way to go.
So I've been writing about Magna for a long time, almost 25 years, and I've heard the story so many times about, side view mirrors, rear view mirrors, they're going away. They're going away. Everything's going to be replaced by cameras. And we are seeing a lot more camera activity in vehicles, side view, rear view. So my first question is whether you do see an actual horizon now, a date at which mirrors will disappear from cars. That's the first question. The other one is, a couple of weeks ago you spoke at MBS, the conference up in Traverse City, and you were kind of blunt about demanding that the auto industry do a better job explaining to consumers some of the technologies on board. And I think you specified adaptive cruise control and lane keeping, driver assistance. And I was curious what kind of feedback you got from automakers or from other suppliers about that, or even from dealers, which really represent kind of the front line to the consumers.
And Swamy, we'll need a relatively quick answer. We're down to the last minute and a half here.
Sorry.
Yep. Tom, I think I remain rooted to my statement in saying, explaining to the consumer what really it means, whether it comes from regulators or some other places. I think OEMs are always going to have a brand differentiator as they talk through the things but I think it's important for consumers to understand and differentiate from one from the other. The other part you talked about was the mirrors. I think it's a long tail. It's going to be an evolution. For us, the inside mirrors are now becoming a space where we show other data coming from rear view cameras. There is optimization possible in multiple systems coming together. So I think it's not the mirror going away. What does mirror evolve into, right? It's a space where the driver passenger looks at information, whether you call it a mirror or something else, it is to be seen, but it's still a long tail, I think.
Thanks.
Yeah, that was a great question, because I've heard the same thing, that cameras are going to replace mirrors, and yet the mirrors just keep getting more and more sophisticated all the time.
Yes.
Look, with this, we're going to have to wrap it up. Swamy Kotagiri, CEO of Magna, thanks so much for sharing your thoughts and your visions. I love what you're saying. It's a $3 trillion industry. You only have 40 billion of it, so there's a lot more up to go. I love that attitude. Tom Murphy with WardsAuto, Mark Phelan with the Detroit Free Press. Want to thank the both of you as well. And of course, I want to thank all of you who tuned in.
Thank you. My pleasure.
Autoline This Week partnered with the Consulate General of Canada in Detroit to produce this episode.